Hey guys, Brent Hull Build Show, talking again about architectural styles. Today we're going to talk about the period revival era. Come join me today in the Build Show. Period revival architecture, what is it? Well, the period revival era, and remember, we are going over architectural styles in America, okay? The reason we're doing this is because I think it helps you become a better builder today if you understand how things were built in the past, if you understand a lot of the architectural details that come from different periods. Remember, we talked about the ranch period and the big picture windows. There are elements of architecture that are almost timestamps of when they happened. And the picture window is a perfect example of that's the 1950s, that's a ranch style, the horizontal lines. And so the period revival era is basically the excitement about this house, okay? It happens between 1920 and 1940, but this kind of architecture enlivened people's senses and made people excited about building and excited about architecture. If you think about the style of architecture that precedes the period revival, the arts and crafts era was a simple, clean style of architecture. And then after World War I, when a bunch of the architects went over to serve in Europe, they saw the quaint villages and they saw the architecture of rural France and things like that, they became excited, and it propels that period revival era forward. Now, the period revival can be a little bit confusing because there's so many different revivals, okay? So there's the colonial revival, right? Obviously, looking back to early American architecture. There's Tudor and English revival. These two are the most popular in America. Mediterranean French, Mission, there's probably 6 more. And realize too that these all marry sometimes. I was in a great Tudor revival house a few years ago, and all the interior was colonial revival. So the way things were built and remembering how this era happened and how these things were built gives us clues to that architecture and that style. So if you think about the architecture of that period, here's just a few American Builder magazines. This one's from 1927. Notice that colonial revival. There's a Dutch gambrel roof there. Notice some of the things, the green tile roof, okay? Notice the 6/1 windows. Those are the things that we're going to be talking about. The English style, okay? There's a little English Tudor. It could be a European Tudor. You've got diamond pane windows. You've got timbering, right? You've got these different windows. You've got casement windows as opposed to double hung. Look at this house, right? Look at the way they've wrapped the shingles around to kind of give that faux influence of the thatch. You know, they're trying to copy that rounded over look, and they did it with shingles. And so you got timbering, leaded glass windows, stone and brick, right? The Tudor revival houses that are being built today, okay, and the English houses are very different from, in my opinion, from the houses that were built in the 20s and 30s. The ones that are built in the 20s and 30s, as are reflected on this Builder magazine, right? That's American Builder magazine, usually not the tip top of the design scale, and yet they've copied and matched architectural details that are wonderful and charming, okay? And a lot of the period and Tudor revival houses that are built today, they just don't capture the magic. Why not? Well, they haven't matched the detailing of the timbering. They don't have the stone details right. They don't have the leaded glass windows. And so there's 5 or 6 things that they're missing that help infuse it and make it better. So your client comes to you and says, hey, I want an English style house. I want you to know what a good English style house looks like. I want you to know what good timbering looks like. I want you to know what leaded glass windows should look like. And so understanding these things is very important. Look at just kind of the design clues I've got here. That 6/1 window that we saw in that Dutch gambrel house. Very popular at this time. Now, remember, it starts with the Queen Anne sash in the Victorian period, the 3/1 in the arts and crafts period, morphs into a 6/1 in this period. A casement window is very important, okay? Casement windows tend to be cottage windows, and we are copying the Tudor and the French early cottage style houses when you see those casement windows. Casement windows in America aren't as popular as double hung windows. So the fact that we see casement windows, and look, so many houses today put casement windows in it when they're not appropriate, especially on a colonial revival house. America, the double hung window and the double hung sash is a fixture of how houses were designed. In the French tradition, casement windows are what they did. So understanding those differences is just one example of getting windows right, getting doors right, getting those details right. But understanding that, you know, casement, double hung windows are very popular on the colonial revival, casement windows on the Tudor and the French, right? If we look at roofs, The Tudor and the French house styles have very steep pitch roofs, okay? The Mediterranean has very low pitch roofs. Why? I've said this before. They had a snow load problem, required a steep pitch roof so that the snow load didn't collapse the roof. Timbering is something that, because they were timber framing their houses and then infilling with brick or stucco, becomes a very important architectural feature, and knowing how to give your house the realistic timbered look without making it look tacked on is, again, a skill of a master builder. Understanding the past, being able to replicate it for your clients, not timbering a house, right? You don't have to be doing timber framing to get a house to give it that authentic look. The roofs, okay? We talked about the steepness of the roofs, but what about the materials? In here, you'll see barrel tile roofs, there's slate roofs, there's shingle roofs. The resources in the 20s and 30s, and here's a good example, are better than resources today. And then just quaint design. And part of this is that if you drive through a 1920s, 1930s neighborhood, there is a charm to those houses. There's a charm to how they're built. Why are they charming, okay? Well, part of it is scale, okay? Part of it is if you're doing a Tudor cottage and your house is 12,000 feet, okay, it's going to be difficult to have a charming cottagey look with a house that's that big. And yet, if you drive through neighborhoods of the 20s and 30s, those 1,500 to 2,500 square foot houses meet the scale and proportion of a house in this era, right? Because that house is probably 1,800 square feet. As you expand that property, right, it's difficult to convey that look. So if I was going to build an English Tudor house and wanted to do proper timbering, the first thing I do is look at pictures. The reason I have all my library and everything else is because I'm always looking for design clues in order to make them authentic, in order to make them beautiful, in order to make them timeless, right? And so I'm chamfering edges, I'm pegging the joints and details, I'm building it the way I see them building it in the past. And sometimes I'll look back to the original houses in France and England. Sometimes I'll look for the houses in the 20s. Rarely, okay, am I looking at houses built after 1980 for authentic detailing. Okay, this is just the way it is. As we study this period revival era, okay, and understand it's from the 20s and 30s, we do that so that when we're remodeling these houses, we actually know the proper details to put in them. And then when we're building new houses, either a colonial revival house or a Tudor revival house or a French styles or a mission revival house, you will infuse it with the proper details so that it looks right, it looks better, and you will gain these skills as a master builder and get better. A good example of a period revival house, if you look at the Staub house and look at the things that they did inside that house, from the parapet end, but that oriel window on the side, okay? If you look at the pieces that he did in there, you got a steel window, you've got colored glass that conveys that sense of age, the hardware. An oriel window is kind of a French kind of detail window that it's really more of a bay window. An oriel actually sits out kind of as a circle on top of it. But if you look at the door hardware, if you look at the size and the scale of the windows, all of those things were meant to convey the past. What you see sometimes isn't always perfectly Mediterranean or Tudor or French. That house we looked at on Pembroke here in Fort Worth in that 1920s neighborhood was kind of a weird mix of different things, but it did have the type of windows, it did have the brickwork, it had to have a barrel tile roof, right? It had some of those features and details that, you know, ground it in that period and ground it and help it to drive down that street. You go, this is a period revival street. I mean, the scale of the houses, the different styles from colonial revival to English to French, all those different things are represented there, and you go, yeah, this is totally what this is. I want you to be able to recognize those houses and see that just as well. You know, that Georgian house we built, copied off Drayton Hall, right? There was a situation where we were looking at a colonial revival house. A couple wanted a very traditional house. So what did we do for them? We looked to the past, we looked to Drayton Hall, and then we infused that house with Georgian and federal details so that it captured the spirit of that time. The big moldings, the shape of the moldings, the Georgian stairway, that front porch with the columns and the graduated fenestration, the brickwork, the gauged brickwork, right? The rubbed brick. All of those things were little small details that we did to make that house better. And so really to build well today, we're looking at the past. That's why these houses are successful, because they look to the past and studied the past. We need to do the same thing today if we want our houses to be, you know, that kick-ass level. Okay guys, so period revival, 1920s to 1940s, that infusion of these architectural styles and inspiration from Europe and from early America. To build those houses well today, okay, we have to study the past and be as authentic as they were, because they studied those period books. Most of my library's books from the 20s and 30s of colonial revival details, of Tudor revival details, right? And so they study the past. We should study the past in order to build better today. I want you to recognize these details so that you can help your clients and help them build better. I'm Brent Hull. Thanks for watching.